자, 그러면 이제 앞으로 이제 토크를 진행을 할 텐데요. 일단은 제가 이제 준비된 질문을 로저에게 하고, 그 다음에는 이제 청중에서 질문을 받아가지고 자유롭게 서로 얘기하는 시간을 가지고자 합니다. 자, 그러면은, 아무래도 소개를 좀 해드려야 되겠죠. 물론 브로셔에 나와 있습니다만, 지금 어떤 일을 하고 계시고, 어디에 살고 계시는지. 네.
나는 보통의 여행 가이드입니다. 등산 가이드, 외국인 손님 함께 나 회사 이름 하이크 코리아. 하지만 코로나 바이러스 있어요. 근데 외국인 손님 없어요. 그리고 나는 사진작가입니다. 백두대간 탐험가 많이 했어요. 북한 재미있어요. 그리고 요즘에 나는 화가 하고 페인팅하고 North Korea mountain scenes. 나는 굴에 산동명 굴에 지리산 살아요 지금.
예. 근데 이상하게 다 들리네요. 여러분 다 들리시죠? 네. 지금 굴의 산동면에 사신다고 하셨는데 제가 알기로는 이제 원좌마을이거든요. 그래서 원좌마을 주민들하고 친하게 잘 지내는지 또 이렇게 재밌는 뭐 에피소드라도 있는지 한번 물어봐 주시겠어요?
재미있어요 지금. 옆집 사람 are very good people and there's always plenty of food in my village. 김치, 된장, 고구마 많이 있어요.
로저가 김치를 진짜 잘 드세요. 매운 거를 되게 잘 드시더라고요. 예를 들면 뭐 청양고추 넣고 물갈비 같은 거 그런 것도 되게 잘 즐기시더라고요. 네, 그래서 굴에 살고 계시다는 거 알아봤습니다. 그러면은
Do you want like some incidences from where I live in my village?
예, 제 얼굴을 보고 말씀하시면 곤란해요.
Like village life is very 평화 있어요. So really the life in the village is quite easy. Sometimes the only problems you have are like 시골에 가끔 너무 시끄러. And then 매일 아침 there's always like an announcement like 안녕하십니까. 이장님입니다. 오늘부터 우리말 뭐뭐뭐. But that's like 5시 반. And then when he's finished, so I wake up, what? And then he's finished, 끝났어. But sometimes, maybe 10분 나중에, he come back because he forget to say something. So in my village, all the announcements are live announcements, no recording.
여러분도 이렇게 경험하시죠? 저도 막 아파트 경비원 할아버지가 가끔 이렇게 방송을 하세요. 느릿느릿 말씀하셔가지고 이제 끝났어? 그러면 다시 한번 말씀드리겠습니다. 이렇게 해갖고 처음부터 끝까지 또 다시 한번 하시는 그런 경험이랑 비슷한 것 같습니다. 예, 재밌는 에피소드고 예, 한국말하고 또 영어하고 이렇게 막 섞어서 하시기 때문에 절반 알아듣고 절반 버리고 뭐 이제 통역사 선생님이 참 난감하시겠어요. 화이팅! 자, 그러면은 저희가 또 깜짝 퀴즈를 좀 내보도록 하겠습니다. 그래가지고 마치시면은 선물이 있습니다. 선물. 여러분들은 우리가 지금 로저셰퍼드랑 이야기를 하고 있는데 로저셰퍼드가 백두대간 최초종주 지구인이라는 타이틀을 가지고 있잖아요. 그런데 북쪽에서도 아마 사진 전시회를 한 걸로 알고 있어요. 그래서 북쪽에서는 백두대간을 뭐라고 부를까요? 아시는 분 손? 예.
백두대산줄기.
예, 맞습니다. 자, 그러면 가장 먼저 맞히셨기 때문에 저 이거를 선물로 드리도록 하겠습니다. 이게 방역 키트입니다. 예, 박수 한번 보내주시죠. 이제 로저가 사실은 뉴질랜드 분이잖아요. 그런데 이 뉴질랜드에서만 사시지 않은 걸로 알고 있어요. 그래서 어디에서 어떤 일들을 하시면서 사셨는지 간단하게 좀 라이프 스토리를 듣고 싶습니다.
Yeah, I'm from New Zealand originally, and I left my country when I was about 21 years old, or 22, and I went to England, and I continued with my work in England as a carpenter. I made quite good money in England doing that, and then I spent some of that money traveling through Europe for 1 month. And then I came back to England and I made another decision after that. In my country, when I was a young man, we have a kind of travel experience we call OE, which means overseas experience. So we have a culture where we try to motivate our young people to travel the world for 1, 2, or 3 years or more, and then come back to our country and bring everything you learned from travel, bring it back to New Zealand and then start your life. So England was a kind of comfortable, easy place to start, because it's after England I decided that I would go to Africa. And in Africa I didn't know anyone. I had no idea about what to do or where to go. But I had money, so I hitchhiked around Africa, Southern Africa and Eastern Africa for 2 years before I ran out of money. And so when I had maybe only $500 left of money, maybe $08, that's it. I was in Kenya. $500 was enough money to buy an air ticket back to London. But instead of spending the $500 on an air ticket, I decided to hitchhike with that money all the way to South Africa. And I had met some South Africans in my travels who worked in the wildlife industry. So I decided that I liked Africa that much that I would try and stay in Africa, but to stay in Africa I needed a job, so I travelled back down to South Africa to try and start a new career. So I ended up working on a game farm for wild animals in South Africa for 2 years, and then I moved to Mozambique working with wildlife there, and then I ended up in Zambia for 2 or 3 more years, where I became a safari guide and a wildlife ranger for the national parks. The work was often quite dangerous because as a safari guide, we did all our safari guiding on foot. There's no car. So we would walk through the savannah with guests, looking for lion and elephant and hippopotamus and other big dangerous animals. So I was a young man in my 20s, so it was a good experience for me to learn how to deal with dangerous situations and use my brain for survival and many other skills. So I was quite fortunate to be able to learn a lot about myself through that type of work.
네. 이제 인생 이야기가 굉장히 많이 길어지고 있어가지고 그러다가 이제 한국에 와서 잠깐 영어 강사로도 일을 하셨고요. 뉴질랜드에 다시 돌아가가지고 좀 안정적인 일자리를 좀 해야 되겠다 그래가지고 경찰로도 일하셨고 경호원으로도 일하시다가 이제 2006년도에 이제 한국으로 다시 오시는 그런 라이프 스토리입니다. 근데 이제 다음 질문으로 이제 넘어가자면. 이제 아마 참석하신 분들이 궁금하실 것 같아요. 백두대간에, 여기 한국의 백두대간에 어떻게 해서 처음에 이렇게 큰 관심을 가지게 되셨는지.
Yeah, it was a chance in the end. After Africa, I returned back to my home country, hoping to do something remarkable in New Zealand. There was an advertisement in the newspaper for teachers in Korea. I came first to Korea in 1999 in Daegu, and I taught English for 1 year there, and that's how I first got introduced to Korean mountains. So on our weekends we would go to the mountains, and I could see the temples and the mountains, and I knew there was a lot of mountains in Korea from that time. But in 2001 I went back to New Zealand and I joined the police. And then in the police, I had lots of holiday leave to use. So the next time I came back to Korea was in 2006. And in 2006, my plan was just to hike national parks. So in 2006, I came back to Korea with a holiday for 3 months. And my plan was to hike national parks. But a friend of mine who lived here said to me, you should try the Bekdudegan. So we had a look at that on the map, and then I decided to hike Bekdudegan first in 2006. So in 2006, I think I was the first foreigner to explore Bekdudegan. The scenery was amazing, and plus the adventure was kind of incredible, because no one knew about Bekdudegan for Weigukin, and a lot of Koreans didn't know what Bekdudegan was in 2006 too. But there were Korean people hiking Bekdudegan, so I followed their information. But halfway through the 2006 백두대간 trek, there was a huge jangma, and I got off the ridge and stopped walking halfway. And I said to myself, this is a really amazing experience and a beautiful mountain ridge. Maybe I should write a guidebook about that. So I decided to come back again in 2007 because it's easier with a friend, and then hike the entire Bektudegan in 2007 and then go back to my country and write a guidebook about it. So that's where it all began. Me and my friend Andrew, we wrote the guidebook in our spare time. He wrote one section, I wrote the other section. But on the Bektudegan, we had taken photos of information boards. And then we got some translators to translate all the information. And as we wrote the guidebook, we discovered that the Bektudegan was not just a mountain ridge. It was actually a kind of symbol for the Korean people. A symbol of like hope for reunification. A symbol of like Pongsu Jiri. And a symbol of many indigenous religious cultures of Korea. Bulgyo, Dokyo, Sansinyeong. It just became very fascinating for Weigukin to like have all this storytelling. So by the time we finished writing the guidebook, I was kind of starting to become very interested in Korean mountains. And so I actually came back to Korea again in 2009. And this time I took leave without pay from my employer, the New Zealand Police, and I hiked Jongmak, Namhan Jongmak for 6 months, for Yosotdal. And I just went Bangnanja, you know. I just kind of broke free from everything in my life and just felt like so free and like it was an amazing experience for me to just kind of hike Korean mountains or the Jongmak system. So at one stage on that Jongmak Tamhamga, I actually made a decision about my life, what I would do next. And I think it was on a mountain here near Jeonju called Obongsan. 이 Jongmak-san, ne? Obongsan, ne? Yeah. I think I was on Obongsan and I was standing there, beautiful day like today. I started laughing like a little child. I kind of had this kind of moment of, later on, Buddhist monks said I had a moment of enlightenment, where I just kind of broke free. And I had this like moment of like uncontrollable joy, right, of where I was on this mountain. And I had decided that maybe I should stay in Korea and try and make a business of this because it's a beautiful country with great mountains. And I had one more bit because it's kind of part of the story. And at the same time, I was having this moment of enlightenment. A woman was behind me. I didn't know she was there. And she goes, like in Korean, "죄송합니다, 안녕하세요." And I turn around, and she's standing there with like this paper cup, jongi cup, and like with some like some cold drink inside it. So I take it. No, it wasn't makgeolli, but I take it, and and it was like electric, because at the same time, well, I was kind of high from being enlightened, and then she gave me this drink, and it was like insam uyu. There's milk and insam mixed together, and it was delicious. And I took that, and it was like, wow, I'm going to quit my job in New Zealand as a police officer, as a Gyeonghowan. It's a good job, man. But I was prepared to quit my job based just on that one moment of euphoria.
굉장히 길었는데 우리 동영 선생님이 어떻게 소화를 잘 하실지. 지금 로저가 굉장히 흥분한 거 여러분 느끼시죠? 여기에 좀 방점이 찍혀 있습니다. 뭔가 뭐 득도의 순간 뭐 이런 것처럼 제가 느껴지는데요. 제가 이제 쭉 이야기를 들어보니까 저도 빠져가지고 무슨 사회고 뭐고 이야기에 좀 많이 빠지게 되네요. 그렇게 해서 이제 남한으로 오시게 됐나 봐요. 그러면은 아마 이제 그 후에 남쪽 백두대간을 이렇게 다 오르신 것으로 알고 있는데, 그럼 우리가 또 이제 가장 궁금한 거는 이제 북쪽 백두대간을 또 오르셨잖아요. 어떻게 그 결심을 하시게 됐고 어떤 경로로 또 우리는 좀 쉽게 갈 수가 없잖아요. 물론 저 같은 경우는 백두산을 갔다 왔습니다만 네. 이쯤에서 자랑질 좀 한번 하고 대부분 우리 국민들은 이제 북한을 못 가는데 어떤 경로로 북한을 이렇게 방문하시게 되었는지 그 이야기로 좀.
So after I came back to live in Korea from 2010, I had my company and I knew I would struggle for at least 2 or 3 years. I wanted to make a photo art book of mountains of South Korea. And I had a friend, a 한국 친구, who was an ex-출판가 publisher. So I said to him, is it a good idea for me to try and make a photo art book of South Korea mountain? He goes, no, it's a 진짜 바보 idea. Yeah. I says, why? He says, because firstly, you are not a 사진작가, so 어떻게 해요? And secondly, there are many, many 사진집책 in South Korea of South Korea mountain and good photographers, better than you. So he said, but if you can go to Bukhan and take 백두대간 사진 찍고, that is special, and it might be worth something. So I said, okay then, Bukhan 간다. 어떻게 몰라요? And maybe it's not a good idea because, like, North Korea is kind of dangerous place and many bad stories. But I found a way to go through the 조선 New Zealand 친선협회. I contacted them, told them what I wanted to do, and then they gave me some contacts in Pyongyang. I emailed them, and then in May 2011, I flew to Pyongyang through Beijing to discuss with them whether it was possible for me to go to the 백두대간 mountains of North Korea and take photos. And it was actually their idea at the time that said to me, yeah, if you can take photos of our mountains, but we want you to also include 백두대간 Namhan, because we think it's a good idea that you should connect the 백두대간 north and south as a message of unity. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea too. Yeah, I can do that. 할 수 있어요. And that's what happened, yeah. So they liked the idea. On the first expedition was actually the same year in October 2011, and we spent about 4 weeks exploring Gangwon-do and Pyongan-nam-do. And then the next mission was in 2012 from June to July, and we explored Hamgyeongnam-do and Yangang-do. And then from those 2 expeditions, I was able to put together a photo art book of mountains of Bektudegan. And that's kind of where my journey started, from about there.
이렇게 가끔 저를 보고 이렇게 얘기를 하시면 제가 이렇게 심오한 다 알아듣겠다 이렇게 고개를 끄덕이잖아요. 네, 좀 연기입니다. 메소드 연기. 네.
And yeah, so after that, then I went back to North Korea several other times after that because I began an interest in North Korea. But I also went back to explore more of Bektudegan in 2 expeditions in 2017. So in May and June, and then next again was in August and September. And we actually went to more and more mountains of the Bektudegan and took photos there and made another book, 북한이 백두대간 산과 마을과 사람들, which was a very nice book because it had like storytelling as well, written in Korean. But unfortunately it's sold out of print. And then, yeah.
우리는 못 사는 거야? 그러니까 북한 백두대간 산과 마을 뭐 사람들이 아마 그쪽일 거예요. 그리고 이제 우리 퀴즈 타임 가져보려고 합니다. 그런 게 맞나 표현이? 야 그러면 이제 지금 로저가 그 북한의 백두대간에 오르는 그런 과정을 여러분들 듣고 계시는데요. 백두대간에 대한 상식을 또 여러분들에게 한번 테스트 해보고자 합니다. 제가 이제 보기를 4개를 드릴 텐데요. 그 4가지 산 중에서 백두대간에 속하지 않는 산을 고르시면 됩니다. 자, 그러면 첫 번째 1. 백두산 2. 묘양산 3. 두류산, 4. 덕유산. 이 4개의 산 중에서 백두대간에 속하지 않는 산의 이름은 네, 여기 맨 앞에 2번이 뭐였죠? 묘양산. 맞을까요? 예, 맞다고 합니다. 야, 바꾸지 마. 네, 맞췄습니다. 우리 꼬마가 잘 맞췄어요. 오세요. 예. 자, 우리 꼬마는 역시 좀 안전한 생활을 위해서 코로나 키트 드리도록 하겠습니다. 잠깐만요. 들어가지 마시고 인터뷰 한번 하셔야죠. 기념으로 어서 오세요. 자, 어디에서 오신 어떤 분이신지 우리 참가자분께 소개 한번.
전 전주에서 왔어요.
전주에서 왔어요?
네, 그냥 전주에.
전주가 집이에요?
네.
개인 정보를 밝히지 않겠다는 어떤 강력한.
그래서 말해요?
아니요, 그게 아니고요. 뭐 어느 학교를 다닌다든지 어떻게 왔는지.
저는 온비초등학교 4학년 2반이고요. 엄마 아빠 따라서 왔어요.
와서 보니까 어때요? 들어보니까 흥미로워요?
네.
네, 그렇다고 합니다. 네, 큰 박수 보내주십시오. 감사합니다. 또 이제 제가 생각할 때 좀 청소년들이나 이제 좀 우리 어린이들이 좀 왔으면 좋겠다 싶은 생각이 들었는데 어떤 인생을 사는 방식이랄까요? 이런 좀 새로운 자극이 됐으면 좋겠다 이런 생각도 좀 해봅니다. 돌아가셔가지고 엄마 아빠하고 좀 좋은 얘기 나누시고요. 자, 우리 얘기가 좀 끊겼는데 어디까지 갔죠? 또 출간했다. 북한의 백두대간 산과 마을과 사람들을 출간하게 되었다. 그러면은 북한의 이제 백두대간을 얼마나, 그러니까 몇 군데나 오르셨는지 되게 궁금하고요. 또 이제 자연스럽게 흐름을 끊지 않기 위해서 다른 질문까지 같이 드리면, 저도 이제 평양을 방문한 적이 있지만 분명히 로저를 도와준 평양 북한 분들이 계셨을 거예요. 안내원들이. 그래서 그 안내원들 기억, 어떤 안내원이 있었고 그 안내원들이 이렇게 로저에게 어떻게 대해줬는지 그런 추억이, 소개할 만한 추억이 있다면 좀 듣고 싶습니다.
I think I've climbed over 50 different mountains of the Bekdudegan in North Korea. And not all of them were published in my books because sometimes climbing the mountains of the Bekdudegan in North Korea, we didn't know what the mountain looked like from the top. There's like no information. So the only way to find out was to go there. And sometimes you could climb some mountains in North Korea like Itamita Hebal, and it'd just be like Suplim Isel, like full of forest at 2,000 meters. And like, I'm thinking, how do I photograph this? So a lot of the photos I took, despite the fact that I went to 50 mountains, not all of those mountains are in my books. We used local guides, so they're not actually guides, they're kind of like Salimsan people. We would ask the Ijangnim, who's the best man to take us to the mountain? So there were a lot of different people that my team worked with. And we camped every night, most of the time, with our vehicle. So we have a vehicle, and we have our tents and our food. So we would always find in the villages somewhere where we could camp and get water and cook our food and stuff. So often the local guides would stay with us as well for 2 or 3 days while we were exploring that area. So there have been several different men and women that I've had some very memorable times with in North Korea. Perhaps one good story is there's another mountain called Duryusan in Gangwon-do. It's the start point for the Imjingang River. It's like 1,323 meter hebao. And you can see it from like the roadside, yeah? It's quite a big mountain. Even though it's like 1,300 meter, it looks very big, yeah? And we were going to climb that the next day. And we had our Salimchon man with us. And so my team is just me, one Weigukin, and like Pyongyang Saram team, right? So Gisanim, Hammyong, and 2 men from the New Zealand Joseon Chinson Hape. So they're like Pyongyang Shine Namja. So they don't go to a mountain, right? Much. So they're always asking, how long will it take for the local guide? And the local guide, his name was Mr. Han. I can't remember his full name, yeah, but he was like a kind of mountain man, 산사람, yeah, and he says, 두루산 1시간만. And we go, really? That's impossible, yeah. But he was adamant we could climb it in 1 hour. So the next day we start, and like 6 hours later, we get to the top of the mountain after 6 hours. And then we decide to start calling Mr. Han Shigan. And that was his new nickname, yeah. Because it was not 1 hour, it was like 6 hours. So that was a pretty funny time as a group.
예, 저도 북쪽 남자분들 여러 만나봤지만 북쪽 남자분들이 상당히 뭐라고 할까요? 예, 능글능글? 좀 그런 게 있어요. 그래서 농담도 굉장히 많이 하고 굉장히 재밌는 분들이 많으세요. 아마 그 중에 미스터 한이라는 분도 그런 분들 중에 한 분이 아닌가 싶습니다.